World of Warcraft has seen some very dark times. Content droughts, design fiascos, scandals, systems too complex for their own good, and radio silence as community engagement hits an all-time low. And now Final Fantasy XIV and other competitors are closing in. But I don't think this has to be the end of the story for World of Warcraft. What World of Warcraft needs is simpler systems, more content, better community engagement so that the dev teams know what will get players excited to pick up World of Warcraft again. To that end, I have invented a system of my own, a simple system that gives players huge amounts of customization, that lets developers add awesome and useful abilities without fear of spellbar bloat, giving players the ability to upgrade 3 of their spells to be something new. I'm cooking up concepts for 7 of these upgrade spells for every spec. Some of them are returning favorites, some of them are brand new. Either way, Blizzard has my express permission to use every concept I post about in these videos in the comments or on the forums. And if the Blizzard developers are too pressed for time to engage with the community, then I will. I'll get the feedback on this concept, and even if they don't take a single one of my ideas, they'll know what the players want, and most importantly, why. And they can use that to make the game better, because I want this game better. I want WoW to last another decade. Ooh boy, Warlocks. I was cooking up these upgrades one class at a time, and Warlocks were actually the second to last class that I upgraded, and the second to last that I'm editing as well, and in retrospect, it was probably for the best that I got some experience looking at most of the other classes before I even attempted to cook up a spread of upgrades here. I mean, I looked at the rotations and spell lists on Icy Veins, I looked at the talents and PvP talents on Wowhead. As wise as all of that was, it would be foolish to think that tells me everything I'd need to know about what it's like to play a Warlock, or enough to make a set of upgrades that actually excites players. And that's true of every class, which is why I keep asking for feedback and spamming the word iterate in these videos. It was not easy figuring out what to upgrade. I figure I had to have made some mistakes with this class, but I need player feedback to let me know what those mistakes were. In a lot of cases, I took single target damage abilities and made upgrades available that made them multi-target. And in a lot of cases, I made upgrades available that added new ways of getting debuffs onto multiple targets. I don't know if that was brilliant or dumb, or for that matter, if it was smart in principle but badly implemented in my first iteration. Again, I know that I need feedback to know. So without further ado, let's get into what I did for Destruction so you'll be able to tell. The first upgrade is Searing Pain, an upgrade for Incinerate that has a 1.5 second cast time, deals less damage, and has less than 100% chance to grant an extra soul shard on critical. The next one is Shadow Orb, an upgrade for Chaos Bolt that has a higher base damage amount but is no longer guaranteed to crit. Next we have Shadow Flame Spike, an upgrade for Conflagration that deals multi-target damage instead of single target, and it deals the damage as Shadow Flame damage. Next we have something that may have been a big mistake on my part. Chain Darkness, an upgrade for Shadow Bolt that generates soul shards and deals damage to multiple targets and has a short cooldown. Fifth, we have Burning Embers, an upgrade for Corruption that has a 1.5 second cast time, deals a small amount of multi-target damage over time, and every time it ticks for damage, it spreads Immolate to another target. The sixth upgrade is Shadow Bolt Volley, an upgrade for Rain of Fire that deals damage to multiple enemies in a cone and costs more shards and deals more damage than Rain of Fire would. Finally, we have Demonic Breath, an upgrade for Shadow Fury that blasts targets in front of you away and slows them by 50%. Now we get to the thinking. I like taking abilities that have no place in your rotation and giving them a place. It's like getting a new spell. Plus, I noticed that it's been a while since a Chain Lightning-like multi-target spell was added to the game, so that's why I picked the chaining effect instead of a splash effect for Shadow Bolt. To be honest, I kind of hate seeing a multi-target spender with no multi-target builder when I look at a class's design. It just rubs me the wrong way. And at the time I wrote that, I hadn't noticed the Fire and Brimstone talent. Anyhow, it's also worth noting that some players like the older animation for Shadow Bolt, and this is the perfect opportunity to revive that older animation. Now, after I'd thought about all this and added Chain Darkness, I saw the Fire and Brimstone talent, so I decided to give it a cooldown. That way, it'll have more damage than a Fire and Brimstone empowered Incinerate, but that Fire and Brimstone will still have a place in your rotation. If this was a dumb move to save a redundant spell, then please do let me know, and let me know what I should put in its place or do with Shadow Bolt instead of Chain Darkness if that's an upgrade that can't be salvaged. And one more thing. The resources I use for my research online, which are Icy Veins and Wowhead, aren't telling me in so many words whether Incinerate out and out replaces Shadow Bolt for Destruction Warlocks. At least there are no recent posts that say whether it does or not. I know there are specs that do replace abilities as soon as you choose the spec, like how Assassination Rogues instantly get their Eviscerate finisher replaced with Envenom when they switch to the Assassination spec. But I also know that, even after a decade and a half of Blizzard merging abilities, pruning abilities, making abilities spec-specific instead of class level, and all kinds of other tricks to take abilities away from us players, there are still a few abilities that are technically on spellbars, even though they're useless. Primal Strike for Elemental Shaman and Shield Slam for Arms and Fury Warriors come to mind. And at the time I cooked up the Chain Darkness upgrade, I had assumed Shadow Bolt was one of these. I realize there's a strong possibility that I just tried to add an upgrade for a spell that isn't even on your spell bar. And if that's the case, this one would be completely redundant with the Fire and Brimstone talent even if I changed it to upgrade Incinerate instead of upgrading Shadow Bolt. Of course, this means there's an open space to put new things in, and other specs could benefit from the Chain Darkness concept instead, and if Shadow Bolt gets replaced with Incinerate the moment you pick the Destruction spec, then me saying all of this is just a flailing attempt at spinning a brain fart as a good thing. And I know it. At least I'm admitting it, if it's true. I really won't know until and unless someone tells me. I would put in the time to level a Warlock to level 10 and find out for myself, but I'm doing these upgrade spreads for 36 different specs, and that limits my time budget. Shoot. I knew I'd make mistakes going into Project Decade, and, well, I will learn soon enough whether this was one of them. And I have spent way too much time talking about just one upgrade, though I suppose it deserved it. I'll move on. Shadow Bolt Volley. One of the reasons why I'm creating the upgrade system is so that cool abilities can get added to players' kits. And I have seen enemy NPCs using Bolt Volley spells, but players never got to use those kinds of spells. Unless you count Paladins with Holy Wrath, back when it had a decent range and harmed only undead, and then became so short-ranged it wasn't a volley spell anymore. Anyhow, I really wanted to bring back Shadow Bolt Volley into the picture. And I did so as a Soul Shard spender to replace Rain of Fire. I don't know for sure if the trade-offs I'm proposing here are the right trade-offs to make, so I am more than open to feedback to tweak the stats of this spell. I'm so hoping that the feedback doesn't tell me to remove Shadow Bolt Volley, as I am quite partial to Bolt Volley spells. But what Destruction Warlock players want is more important than I want, and I know it. Burning Embers was another attempt to take a useless ability and make it useful. Spreading Immolate to multiple targets for a single global cooldown seemed like a good upgrade. It's not the first time I've upgraded a damage over time spreader. It's also not the first time I've taken an older effect's name and brought it back, albeit with a completely different purpose from before. I do worry that having Immolate on multiple targets would produce too many soul shards. If it would, I'm more than happy to add a caveat that there's a maximum to the number of soul shards you can get from simultaneous Immolate ticks. Of course, if Immolate replaces Corruption like I'm worried Incinerate replaces Shadow Bolt, is it anything like a good idea to have Embers function as an upgrade for Immolate? Well, if it was a good idea for Corruption, it'll probably be a good idea for Immolate, but again, I need feedback to let me know what you think. You know better than I. I do know, however, that Burning Embers wasn't a pruned spell so much as a pruned resource, but I figured, why not use it as an active abilities name? Shadow Flame Spike was intended to be another trade-off spell. For a while, I had wanted to make it deal more damage and generate fewer shards, but then I realized Making it deal multi-target damage instead of single target was a more interesting trade-off, if one that I've used a lot in this first iteration. In a possibly cringe way, but I knew I was taking that risk going into Project Decade. If the more damage for less soul shards concept was better, then let me know, and back in it goes. Shadow Orb is another trade-off. Hey, Shadow Priests aren't using that name anymore, so you might as well take it. Wouldn't be the first time one class lost an ability and another class received an ability with the exact same name. Just ask hunters from early vanilla about Lacerate, and then ask druids in the Burning Crusade about Lacerate. I'm so knowledgeable about that, yet so unknowledgeable about whether Incinerate replaces Shadowbolt or Immolate replaces Corruption. Or about what trade-offs are at least situationally worth it, but hey, that's why I need your help. Giving abilities new looks and new feels is easy. Figuring out their nuances is hard. Now that I think about it, this might be a net gain DPS-wise, but it also draws randomization into the destruction rotation that was not there before. I don't know, was this the wrong move? And if this was the wrong move, then what's a better way to upgrade Chaos Bolt? I've already done 3 single-target to multi-target upgrades. Adding a 4th doesn't seem right to me. Demonic Breath is a returning older ability, a talent from late in Mists of Pandaria. It turns Shadow Fury into a directed knockback and slow, trading off one crowd control for another. Each of them looks as cool in its own way, I figure. Searing Pain was me running low on ideas. I know Searing Pain used to be a Warlock spell that caused high threat and got used for tanking in some very weird edge cases in vanilla. Anyhow, this is that spell name making a comeback with a shorter cast time and changing shard generation so that randomization plays less of a role in it. If that's not the trade-off it should have, please do let me know. I wonder if it would generate too many shards with Fire and Brimstone, since that talent already upgrades Incinerate to do multi-target damage. Well, probably baked into Searing Pain would be something under the hood that balances it out if it were actually implemented. I am prepared to change any one of these proposed trade-offs. Damage for cast time, or shard generation, or expenditure, or multiple targets for single targets, you name it, I'll do it. Heck, throwing these out and replacing them with something else is on the table too. Especially if I porked it up with Chain Shadow and the assumption that Shadowbolt was in your kit, but unused for practical reasons. Now, when I started out with these upgrade concepts, I went ability by ability, not purpose by purpose, if you see what I mean. I asked myself, which abilities exist in this specs kit that I can give an upgrade to? And when I created upgrades based on which abilities I could upgrade, I often aimed for something that I thought looked or sounded cool. Almost always I wanted the upgraded ability to feel at least a little bit different from the original. Often I tried to create some kind of trade-off, making the upgrade situationally useful based on things like the number of targets affected or having a stronger effect with a longer cooldown, things like that. Rarely did I upgrade the same ability more than once for the same spec, but while I was putting together each spread of upgrades, what I didn't do, and what I probably should have done in retrospect, was to figure out what goals a player would have while they're looking at a list of upgrades, and then make sure upgrades exist in the spread that allow the player to pick upgrades that help them achieve those goals. In my next iteration, I plan to have that design goal in mind, to consider what the player wants to accomplish and how they could accomplish it with the upgrades. I strongly suspect that in this next iteration, there will be a lot more cases where I upgrade the same ability in 2 or more different ways. That will give players more options, and since that's going to be the goal with goal-oriented design, who knows? I might even have 3 different upgrades for the same ability in the end. However, I can do this much more effectively in an environment that has a great deal of feedback available, and that's where you come in. You have knowledge that comes from experience with these specs. I don't. I tried to do my research on Wowhead and Icy Veins for each spec, but inevitably there'll be things you know that I don't because you have experience that I don't have. You'll have more and better ideas than I could hope to have, and I know I need those, so please, let me know what you think of these upgrades and what better ideas you have for what to put in their places. Now for the evaluation section. Since I cooked up these upgrades ability by ability instead of kit by kit or purpose by purpose, I worry that there might be cases where the upgrade spread as a whole doesn't make sense, even if each upgrade makes perfect sense when you consider it individually. I probably don't have that particular problem here, though not exactly for the reasons I had hoped. In any case, I will proceed with the evaluation as if Chain Shadow were a potential thing and in the spread. If it's not, of course, this evaluation will help me figure out good ideas for what to put in its place. For buffing multi-target damage, there's Chain Shadow, Shadow Bolt Volley, there is Burning Embers, and there is Shadow Flame Spike. For single target, there's Shadow Orb and Searing Pain, and that's it. Maybe there's a silver lining to booting out Chain Shadow. It would let me put some kind of single target buff into the picture. I'm not sure what I should replace it with, though. Feedback would definitely be appreciated. Of course, even if my fears are real and Shadow Bolt isn't on Destruction spellbar, that's just an obvious flaw. There could easily be other flaws in this that aren't as obvious. That's why I'm being so stream of consciousness-y about how I explain why I did what I did with these first iterations. I want my viewers to have as much information about what I was thinking and what my intentions were, because I know I'm fallible. My thoughts and my intentions could be dead wrong. The more you know about how and why I'm on the wrong track, the easier it'll be to get me on the right track. Of course, I know Blizzard probably won't take many, or even any of these suggestions. Heck, they might even have something objectively better in store for us than the semi-borrowed power upgrade system that I've cooked up here. But knowing what gets players excited will be helpful to them even so. That is why I'm sacrificing so much of my free time and energy on Project Decade. And who knows, they might just need these ideas to get WoW going in the right direction. Heck, if this video series just gets the Blizzard developers into the habit of creating a blue post with the thinking in it that goes in depth enough for us to understand what they're doing and what their design goals are, then that would be a huge step forward. Even saying the thinking out loud is sometimes enough to get you a new perspective on what you're doing. Is it really what people want? Does it serve the purposes that it really should be serving in the end? Am I really doing something just to make a system look awesome instead of making the game overall better? What does it do for the fun factor? Am I making the mistake of prioritizing my design goals over the fun factor? Are my design goals the right design goals to have? Do my ideas match the spec's feel and flavor? Is it a net gain? Is it genuinely awesome? Things like that. Plus, we just plain need more communication from Blizzard. If Project Decade gets the development team into the habit of telling us the thinking for every change they make, then the whole project will have been worth it, even if they don't take a single suggestion. Again, if you see something you don't like bad trade-offs or something you know is counterproductive or useless, or if you've thought of an idea that's better or cooler or more useful than mine, then don't hesitate to let me know. The more details you can provide about why you don't like it and what makes one of my ideas counterproductive or useless, or about why your idea is cooler or more useful than mine, the better. One of the main goals of Project Decade is to give whoever's in charge of class design and player power systems a good idea what appeals to players and what will actually get them excited to get back to WoW again. And the more you can say about the wherefore and the why, the better. I fully intend to iterate on this project and make changes in response to feedback. I know I'm going to make mistakes. Heck, I've already seen mistakes in some of the things that I've done. But if those mistakes generate the kind of discussion that Blizzard needs to hear, so much the better. Blizzard needs to see player engagement, humility, and feedback actually making change in action so they can start doing what needs to be done to turn WoW around. It can be done and it should be done. World of Warcraft can last another decade. So keep the feedback coming, folks. There's one last thing. I began working on Project Decade videos back in July, and considering how many months it has taken, the fact that there are 36 different sets of feedback to curate and compile, and multitudes of decisions to make based on feedback received, ideas others have come up with, and how to weave everything together into a fun, functional, and exciting whole, I don't have a chance in the tramaculum of getting this done in any reasonable length of time unless I get volunteers to help me curate and compile the feedback I'm getting. If you're willing to help curate feedback, please let me know. If I get enough interest, I will set up a Discord server where we can coordinate everything. Thank you in advance for your feedback and support. Let's make World of Warcraft the best game that it can be.